A young woman cuts through a quiet suburban park, breathing ragged, her gaze darting, searching for something to anchor her. She finds a man on a weathered bench, alone, and moves toward him without deciding to, drawn by something she couldn't name. Close by, a German shepherd abandons the stick it was chasing. The dog's attention has shifted, locked onto something beyond her. Passers-by see nothing remarkable. A quiet man. His dog. They don't see what he once was. A former Navy SEAL who reads danger the way other people read weather. When she reaches him, her voice barely holds together. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, zero, underscore, underscore. The dog isn't watching her. It's already fixed on the men closing the distance behind her. If this kind of story speaks to you, don't forget to subscribe and be part of the journey. Late afternoon draped itself over a suburban park in Eugene, where light filtered soft across deserted paths, and the world seemed to hold its own breath. On a worn bench near the main trail, Caleb Vance sat motionless. To a stranger, he looked relaxed, but there was a tautness beneath that stillness, the kind that never fully releases. A former Navy SEAL, he wore awareness the way most people wore skin. His head barely shifted, yet his eyes cataloged everything. The weight of approaching footsteps, a broken rhythm in someone's stride, the small fractures in ordinary that most people walked right past. Even at rest, he carried the posture of a man who had never learned how to stand down. The park's silence was thin, breakable. Several yards ahead, his dog wove between the trees, chasing a thrown stick with an energy that was fierce but measured, never spilling into disorder. Caleb had launched it without thinking, the motion worn smooth by repetition. This was his method. Simple rituals, performed until they became walls against the noise inside. For a stretch of minutes, nothing cracked that fragile quiet. Then it shattered. Footsteps broke across the path, too quick, too ragged to belong. Caleb's head turned. Not fast, just enough. A young woman appeared, moving like something with mass and intent was pressing at her back. She wasn't dressed for running. Her breathing had no pattern that could last. Dark hair stuck to her face in damp strands, and her eyes swept the space in sharp, desperate bursts, never settling long enough to find safety. She reached him before her legs fully stopped. Her fingers found his sleeve and clenched, gripping as though he might dissolve if she loosened her hold. "Please, help me," she whispered, her voice thin as glass, desperate not to shatter. "They're coming." Caleb didn't flinch. He didn't offer comfort either. He looked at her, truly looked. Words could be practiced, but this kind of fear couldn't be manufactured. It lived somewhere deeper, in the stutter of her breathing, in shoulders that refused to drop even when she stood still. Quote 3, she managed, swallowing hard. Quote 4. The words stumbled over each other, but the truth beneath them was solid. His training registered what his eyes hadn't yet confirmed. Danger was already seconds from arriving. Behind her, something moved through the leaves, quiet, deliberate. The dog returned. Elena sensed it too late. Sound reached her first. Steady, measured footfalls at her back. She turned and it was already close, larger than she'd expected. Its body coiled with restrained power, every stride controlled, closing distance like it was calculated. For one breathless instant, she felt chosen, targeted, her lungs locked. She couldn't move. Its gaze found hers, sharp, unblinking. Not feral, something worse. Focused in a way that pressed against her chest like a hand. No bark, no bared teeth. The silence was what made it terrifying. This was an animal that didn't warn before it acted. Caleb's voice broke through, low and even. "He won't hurt you." A beat of silence. "Not unless he has a reason." She didn't understand, but she held perfectly still. The dog reached her, then moved past. So close she felt the displaced air brush her skin. Its attention slid off her entirely, as if she had never been the point. Its head swiveled, body dropping slightly lower, every line of muscle directed at something behind her. Elena felt the shift then, a tightening in the space itself, like the air had drawn taut. The dog hadn't been coming for her, it had been coming through her. It settled beside Caleb, positioned just ahead of him now, body angled toward the path. Steady, coiled. No command given, none needed. Caleb followed the dog's line of sight, and then he saw them. The man out front moved with a kind of ease that had nothing to do with genuine concern. His stride was deliberate, his face arranged into something that passed for composure, not worry, but control worn like a second skin. Walter Cross carried himself the way men do when they've never had to earn attention. Authority wasn't something he projected. It was something he assumed had already been granted. The two behind him told a different story. One was built heavy, shoulders hunched forward, the posture of a man perpetually bracing to shove through obstacles. The other couldn't hold still, eyes darting from point to point, cataloging everything, trusting nothing. Walter's gaze landed on Elena first. Then it slid to Caleb, measured him in silence. When he spoke, his voice wore a rehearsed warmth. Quote 7, quote, he said, as though this were nothing more than a scheduling mix-up. Quote 8, quote, Elena's grip tightened. Caleb felt the tremor travel through his sleeve. She's not well, Walter went on, shifting his attention fully to Caleb. His tone softened, almost apologetic, almost kind. My daughter-in-law isn't in a good state. We just want to bring her home. The words landed clean, smooth, reasonable, designed to. Elena shook her head. The sound that came from her was barely formed. He's lying. Caleb didn't turn to look at her. He didn't need to. What he already saw was enough. The park around them continued as though nothing had changed. A couple walking the path slowed their pace, watched just long enough to sense the shape of what was unfolding, and decided it wasn't theirs to enter. They kept walking. Distance was always easier than involvement. Always had been. Caleb stood from the bench, not quickly, not dramatically, with a kind of inevitability, the way weather shifts. The open ground between them narrowed into something defined, something with edges. The dog moved with them. No signal given, no pause to consider, just understanding. Elena's voice dropped again, nearly swallowed by the space between breaths. Please, don't let them take me. Caleb's eyes remained on Walter, calm, steady, entirely unmoved by the version of reality being offered. He didn't answer her, but the way he positioned himself, just slightly forward, just enough to redraw the line between her and them, that said everything she needed to hear. He hadn't reacted immediately, but something behind his eyes had already shifted the moment he looked at Elena. Fear like hers didn't grow from confusion. It grew from repetition, from knowing exactly what comes next because it has come before. He rose from the bench slowly. No rush, no performance. Just half a step to one side, enough to place his body between her and the three men standing ahead. Rex changed with them. That easy looseness from moments earlier vanished. Something tighter replaced it, more intentional. His weight redistributed with precision, body leaning slightly forward. Each step small, measured, as though he were mapping distance and angles simultaneously. Ears locked forward, spine subtly curved. Not tension, readiness. Walter kept his voice level, but the softness had bled out of it. You don't understand the situation, he said, addressing Caleb the way a man explains something elementary to a stranger. She hasn't been stable since my son passed. Daniel, he worked construction, a decent man. A pause, letting the words settle, as though they carried weight and reason. We're not here for trouble. We just want to take her home. Get her the help she needs. His eyes narrowed a fraction. Don't let her pull you into something unnecessary. Behind Caleb, Elena's fingers dug tighter. Her voice barely held together. One of the men behind Walter stepped forward, just a fraction, then stopped. His gaze had dropped to Rex. He muttered, tried to sound dismissive. The hesitation underneath gave him away. Caleb didn't look at him. He decides that. The space between them shifted again, narrowed. No one moved first in any obvious way, yet the distance compressed all the same. No one issued a command, but tension built anyway. Quiet, steady, like pressure behind a door waiting for the slightest push. Walter adjusted his tone, lower now, edged with something harder beneath the polish. Do you realize how this looks? He said. A man sitting alone in a park with a young woman who's clearly unstable. I can make one call and explain exactly what you're doing here. Caleb met his gaze without blinking. You can try, The heavier man behind Walter forced out a short laugh, more performance than feeling. It's just a dog. His next half step never landed. The response came before conscious thought could register, jaws snapping shut with a crack that split the air, stopping just short of flesh. Not a miss, a message. The man recoiled, a curse hissing through his teeth, his feet skidding beneath him before he found his balance. The second one went rigid, eyes fixed on Rex, shoulders drawn up tight, his body making the decision his mouth hadn't yet. Quote, 24, he managed, voice stripped down to something thin and exposed. Whatever bravado had carried him here, dissolved. Walter held his ground, but for the first time, no words came. His gaze shifted from Rex to Caleb and back again, recalculating, measuring variables he hadn't accounted for. Caleb kept his voice low, each word deliberate. She said no. He offered nothing else, but the words settled into the space between all of them, like a weight dropped onto still water. The tension cinched tighter, pulling everything inward, contracting. One more step from either direction would shatter it. Then, a siren. Distant at first, threading through the silence, growing sharper as it traced the road beyond the park. The effect was instant. One of the men turned his head toward the sound. The other exhaled hard, retreating a step without realizing he'd done it. Walter stayed motionless a beat longer. Then his eyes followed the siren, and something tightened almost imperceptibly across his face. Not here, not now. He stepped back. This isn't over, he said. The composure was gone from his voice. Caleb said nothing. Walter turned. The two men fell into step behind him, wordless, their pace measured but faster now. The swagger from minutes ago replaced by something cautious, watchful. They vanished beyond the tree line within seconds. Rex didn't pursue. He held his position, eyes tracking the path until every trace of them was gone. His body still angled toward the direction they'd taken, as though the encounter hadn't fully closed. Only when the space stood empty again did the tension in his frame ease. Barely. The siren passed without slowing. Quiet returned. But it wore a different shape now. The apartment door latched with a soft click, and still Elena turned slightly, half expecting it to swing open again. Her body hadn't registered safety yet. Caleb noticed. He didn't speak. Instead, he moved through the apartment with an unhurried ease, placing things in order without thought, offering her room to catch up to the stillness. Rex stopped near the entrance. Didn't lie down. Didn't settle. Just held his ground, as if the world outside still had a grip on the air in here. Elena stood motionless another moment. Then a slow breath released, and she lowered herself into a seat. Her hands hovered close to her body, fingers clenching and unclenching with no rhythm, no purpose. A stretch of silence passed before she found words. 25, she said quietly. Not a question, not seeking an answer. Caleb leaned against the wall, watching, listening. She went on. A beat of stillness. Her gaze dropped to her hands, studying them as though they belonged to a stranger. Caleb's face gave away nothing, but something in his posture shifted, a fraction. Then I met Daniel, she said. And for the first time, something gentler moved through her voice. He didn't look at me like I was temporary. Never asked me to become something else. He just... The sentence broke off. She let it go. Silence filled the room again, but it carried weight, not emptiness. He's gone now, she added, barely above a whisper. And after that, it felt like I stayed in place while everything around me changed. Caleb gave a single nod. And Walter? Elena's jaw set hard. Quote, 35 Rex stirred near the door, ears rotating toward the sound of her voice. Quote 36, she said. Quote 37. Caleb straightened off the wall. Quote 38. She looked up, uncertain. Quote 39. He didn't answer right away. He reached for his phone, stepped to the side, and placed a call. The voice on the other end picked up fast. Lucas Grant wasn't a man who wasted time with pleasantries. His tone belonged to a man accustomed to untangling difficult situations, clinical, stripped of sentiment. Caleb kept the details lean. Domestic abuse, sustained, no reports filed, no hard proof in hand. Lucas went quiet for a beat. Then, you don't have a case. Nothing that survives contact with a courtroom. Caleb's gaze drifted toward Elena. There has to be a way. There is, Lucas answered. You just haven't found it. Medical records, footage, anything on paper. Without documentation, it's his version against hers. And you already know whose version lands better. The line went dead shortly after. Caleb came back with his expression composed, but sharper now, more intent behind the eyes. Elena gave a slow nod. A brief silence. Caleb's gaze tightened a fraction. You remember the locations? Another nod. And the door code. Everything shifted. The following night arrived without fanfare. The house sat in darkness, precisely as Elena had described. Caleb entered using the code she'd given him. No hesitation. Rex stayed close, soundless, his focus sharpening the instant they crossed the threshold. The air inside carried a different weight, stale, heavy, like a room sealed against its own history. Caleb moved through it deliberately, clearing each space with careful discipline. Rex needed no command. He began working on his own, slower than usual, nose brushing the floor, pausing at certain points, then pressing forward again. He stopped beside a cabinet. Caleb followed. Inside sat the first camera system, exactly where Elena said it would be. One piece secured, but Rex wasn't finished. He drifted deeper into the house, then halted near a closed drawer. No scratching, no bark, just stillness and absolute attention. Caleb pulled it open. Papers. At first glance, unremarkable. Then he started reading. Letters, dozens, all addressed the same way, all written across years. Different handwriting. Identical desperation. He moved through them faster now. Search notices, contact attempts, official filings linked to missing persons cases. Then something else surfaced. Bank statements, withdrawals, signatures that belonged to no one in the room. The pattern assembled itself almost too fast. This wasn't mere control, it was architecture. When Elena saw the documents later, words didn't come right away. She stood motionless, her hands suspended above the pages, as though contact might dissolve them. These are... Her voice cracked apart. Caleb waited. My mother. Barely a whisper. She was looking for me. Each word emerged slowly, her mind fighting to accept what her eyes had already confirmed. More pages. More evidence. She found me. Her breath seized, and he buried it. The understanding didn't arrive as a single blow. It spread, piece by piece, until no corner remained untouched. Everything she had carried about her life, about being discarded, about belonging to no one, all of it fractured beneath her at once. Her knees softened, and she lowered herself down. The sentence wouldn't finish. Caleb's voice came low, steady. She looked at him. Something deeper than fear lived in her eyes now. She said. Rex shifted closer, stopping just beside her. Not touching. Present. Elena bowed her head, her shoulders trembling once, then again. This wasn't fear anymore. Something long sealed was breaking open. By morning, the documents no longer sat in Caleb's apartment. Lucas had them. Movement began. Quiet, but deliberate. Calls placed. Records examined. Names cross-referenced against systems that had overlooked them for years. When Lucas